Good morning. Let's just adjust that slightly. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, good evening if you're watching from somewhere else in the future. If you are watching from the future, let me know when and where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. If you do have any questions throughout, whether you're watching this live or on the replay, whack them in the comments, and if I don't answer them during the live, I will come back and respond to them. I am Duncan from Mind Affinity, but if you're watching this, you probably already knew that. I'm a hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, and coach. I have been doing what I do for nearly 15 years now, getting on that way, which is pretty awesome. I get to spend my life helping people to empower themselves, which is pretty cool. Anyway, doing that has given me somewhat of an insight into people and how they work. And one of the things I find really fascinating is cognitive biases. So cognitive biases are shortcuts in processing things mentally, basically. So it would take a long time for us and a lot of energy for us to need to really think about everything in great detail. And we're not really designed to do that. We have our older part of our brain, which forms our instant instinctual responses to things, and then we attach logic and reason on top of that. And this kind of difference, I guess, between those two is what results in a lot of cognitive biases. So we make assumptions, we make snap judgments and decisions based on beliefs, learnings, and things that we've taken on board. And there's cognitive biases tend to be true throughout at least certain cultures, but mostly cross cultures as well. Good morning, James Chisholm. Thanks for tuning in. I can see there's a load of other people watching, but they haven't said hello yet. Why don't you say hello in the comments? Let me know you're there. So today we're looking at egocentric bias. Ooh, that one sounds fancy. So I'm going to explain what it is. I'm going to explain what it does. I'm going to explain how it serves us. I'm also going to explain how it makes life really difficult for us, more so than it needs to at times, but also how understanding that is part of the key of overcoming some of the challenges that it creates. And if that still makes sense, then you're doing better than me at following what I'm saying. So egocentric bias is the tendency. Good morning, Facebook user. I'm afraid I can't see who you are on the piece of software I'm using because you haven't given StreamYard permission, but that's fine. It's still good to see you here anyway. Yeah, so egocentric bias is the tendency to rely too heavily or to give more priority to oneself and have a higher opinion of yourself. Now, that's not necessarily to say that you think that you're better than other people, but your opinion you will naturally give more weight to. Now, egocentric bias tends to be a bit of an umbrella term. It's not necessarily in itself just one bias. There are lots of other biases that play into it and that are relevant when talking about egocentric bias. Some of them I've already done videos on and covered before. Others I have not, and will be doing videos on soon. So as I mentioned them, by all means go back and check out those previous videos and the future ones. If you want to find them all in one place, head to my YouTube channel, just search for Mind Affinity on YouTube. While you're there, subscribe, and you'll be able to see a playlist that has all of the cognitive biases on them. So I'm trying to do something else underneath, and I shouldn't really be doing that. I should be focusing on what I'm doing. So let me just, there we are, done. I'm not saying you're not always right. So I've just got this comment coming in. You mean to say I'm not always right? Well, you know, it's not my place to say that. I'm sure you are. I don't know who you are, but I'm sure you're always right. So a good example of this would be in a group situation, taking more credit for the success of the group because it came down to you. A really key example of this would be when your opinion, so you have an opinion on something, could be you know, which party you want to vote for in an election, And firstly, you would assume that other people are more likely to agree with you. Because your opinion is right, you would expect that more people will think and feel the same way than necessarily do. I mean, an example of this would be, I don't think anyone would think that Trump expected to not win the election. He was absolutely adamant that he was going to win and that everyone must agree. Oh, it's Ali. Hi, Ali. Thanks for tuning in. So, yeah, assuming that other people are going to agree with your perspective on things, because it's your perspective, it's the only one you know, but therefore you have a natural assumption to think that it's bigger than it is, that it's more valuable than it is. So this can get us into all sorts of trouble, partly just because it gets in the way of us understanding other people's perspectives, or even that other people would have different perspectives. So we can run into a situation assuming that everyone's going to agree with us and not realize that maybe they don't. It can affect us in all manner of ways. So here's a good example of it. Who does more housework? Oh, sorry, I'll rephrase that. Who does more around the house out of you and your partner? Let me know in the comments. Obviously, if you're in a single household, it's not quite the same. But you generally find what happens in this situation is that both partners tend to believe that they do more. Now, that's not necessarily to say that they believe they do more housework, which is why I reworded it, because it could be that, let's use a traditional example. I'm not saying this is right, I'm just saying it's traditional. Let's say the female does more around the house in terms of housework, but the man may feel like he does more around the house because he's always fixing stuff at the weekend, or because he remembers the times when he's doing stuff like taking the bins out and those things that he does do regularly. And so his perception is, because he's not spending the time doing the things that the partner's doing, his perception is skewed based on what he's experiencing, not what someone else is. So I used to live with a flatmate. Flatmates are probably an even better example, because you're normally each responsible for your own mess. And so you're aware of how much time you're spending cleaning up your own stuff, but you're not aware of how much time the person is spending cleaning up their stuff. And so therefore that skews your perception on it. And in your opinion, you do way more than the other person. In the other person's opinion, they may be thinking that they do way more than you. And that causes a lot of friction in shared living situations quite frequently. And because of this egocentric bias, not only can it trick us and fool us like that, but it takes us a step beyond that. And it also leads to us not being able to perceive, believe, or agree that the other person is doing their fair share of the work. Because we see it from our perspective, this egocentric bias means that we have more faith in our own perspective, because it's pretty hard to operate without believing your own perspective, because otherwise it wouldn't be your perspective and you'd live your life constantly confused. And I can imagine James Chisholm commenting to say that he lives his life constantly confused anyway. So yeah, it can be a bit of a funny bias. And I mean, another bias which kind of comes under the umbrella of egocentric bias is this belief that we are all less susceptible to cognitive biases than other people. Especially for myself, this is something that I have to remind myself of regularly, because I understand cognitive biases quite well, and I talk about them a lot, and I look out for them. It's much easier for me to notice them in someone else than it is for me to notice them in myself. So I have to actually take a step back and be aware to notice these cognitive biases, and acknowledge that they're happening to me regularly, just as they are to other people. So the other part of egocentric bias, and the part that I think is really powerful and really useful, and if you've skipped over and ignored the rest of this video, fine, but this is something that you could find really, really helpful for yourself. Because we put more priority, more weight to our own opinions and perspective on things, and less so to others, we tend to assume that other people are thinking the same as we are. Because something's obvious to us, we assume it to be obvious to other people. I mean, this is covered in another bias where I was talking about how if you know a lot about something, the curse of knowledge, if you want to check out the video, it's really hard to get the perspective of someone who's new, and therefore that's why there's so many videos on YouTube that explain things really badly, because someone knows a lot about it, but they've got no idea how to explain it to someone who doesn't. So yeah, the bit that's really useful to take from this and to think about here is that if you're in a situation, let's say you've done something embarrassing or you feel really nervous. So this could be public speaking, for example. You get up on the stage, you're speaking to a room full of people, suddenly you feel really, really nervous. Your perspective in that moment is that everyone can see how nervous you are. Another example of this, maybe you're not the kind of person to go up on a stage and do public speaking at all in the first place. Maybe you've just dropped a tray of glasses in the pub, or you've knocked something, tripped over something, walked into a door. We've all done these things, and in that situation, we're likely to feel embarrassed. And how often do you find yourself in that situation saying when you're describing it afterwards, or thinking at the time, my God, everyone was looking at me. Everyone's watching me. Everyone's thinking what an idiot I am. That's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. But because you're perceiving it that way, you're looking at yourself and thinking, gosh, what an idiot, how embarrassing. You're assuming that everyone else is going to be looking at you and thinking the same thing. But if you were in the other situation, if you watched someone trip, if you watched someone open the door into their own foot because they were being a bit clumsy, knock something over, then are you actually likely to be judging them and thinking, oh God, what an idiot? No, the chances are you're going to think, oh, I hope they're okay. Or you're just the kind of person that loves to laugh at other people's failures. And do you know what? That's okay too. But it won't be as severe and as strong, the people watching you, as it would be for you in that situation. And going back to that public speaking example, you stand up on the stage and you're feeling nervous and you think, oh God, everyone can tell that I'm nervous. They can't, because they are not in your head. They don't have your perspective on things. But what we do is we assume that everyone's going to share our perspective because our perspective is so important. And it has to be important to us as individuals. But that doesn't mean that it has any greater importance to anybody else. So that, in a nutshell, is egocentric bias. The really useful thing that you can take from this, and the thing that can be quite empowering to realize now that you understand it, is that no one cares about your opinion half as much as you do. Now that may feel like I'm saying something quite mean. No one cares about you, James Chisholm. No one cares about you. But actually, what I really mean by that, and why that's a good thing, is that if no one cares as much about your opinion as you think they do, that means that no one's judging you as harshly as you might expect that they are. That means when you do stand up on stage in front of people, when you do put stuff out on Facebook, when you do, great example of this, the other day, yesterday, Zoe just did a dance in her kitchen and she filmed it and she shared it on the internet, not because she's an exhibitionist and wanted to show everyone how amazing her dancing was. It was what she considered to be a silly dance. She was concerned that when she put it out there, that people would laugh at her, but she did it anyway. And funnily enough, people didn't laugh at her. They absolutely supported her. Yeah, well, you just made a good example, James, is all. But you could take that really personally. That kind of falls under the category of egocentric bias as well, right? Because I made a passing comment. But of course, for you, the way you've taken, I know that you're joking and I know that you get that I'm joking, but it holds more important and more weight to you than other people. And so therefore, it's a bigger deal. and I must have actually meant something by it because it means something to you. Do you see? It's very easy for someone to make a passing comment that doesn't really mean anything, or for it to be taken the wrong way or out of context, and suddenly, because of your egocentric bias, you think other people must have seen it the same way as you did. So that person must have meant it the way that they said, the way that you interpreted it is what they meant. And that's not necessarily true. So it could be that someone sends you a message, and you read it a certain way, and you find it hurtful. But with a text message, you don't get tone, you don't get to see and understand how it was really intended, just the words on the page. So you put your own inflection on it. But then it's hard to imagine that someone else could have meant it a different way, because that would be disagreeing with your own perspective on stuff, and you perceive your perspective to be more important than someone else's, or more accurate than someone else's, because of egocentric bias. So that's what it is. Understanding that can allow you to step out there, be braver, and understand that it doesn't matter. Other people will not be judging you as harshly as you're judging yourself. But careful, because it works the other way around. They also might not think you're quite as great as you think you are. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments now, and I'll quickly respond to them. And if you're watching this back on replay, drop your questions anyway, and I'll come back and comment on the post and respond to you that way. Chisholm, I'm glad you take it personally. It was meant that way. Or was it? Who knows? Well, the thing is, whatever your perspective is on it, James, that's going to be true for you, even if it's not true for me. So you can choose to take everything to heart and assume that I meant it and feel offended by it, or you can choose to brush it off and not care, and therefore continue to live your life in a way that is more enjoyable and more positive for you, because why should you care what I think? Or you could just assume that I meant it in a nice way, and that it was actually a friendly, affectionate thing where I was just teasing you because I know you can take it. In which case, actually, it feels quite good. And it's your choice how you perceive that. Don't let your initial reaction and response, your initial bias, dictate how you're going to react to that. And Bananas says hi to everyone. For anyone who doesn't know, this is Bananas. He's the Mind Affinity monkey mascot, and he's the one that sends out my weekly newsletter. It's not a newsletter. It's called Monkey Cool, and it's a burst of positivity straight to your inbox every Sunday. And if you want it, you can subscribe to it too. Just head to mindaffinity.co.uk/contact. Anyway, enough from me. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been great having you here. And I'll see you all same time next Thursday, where I will be talking about, this is what I was getting ready earlier, I will be talking next week about false consensus effect. The false consensus effect. So if you want to know what that's all about, you'll have to tune in Thursday next week, 9 o'clock. Hi, Christina. Nice to see you tuning in. I'm guessing you've missed most of it because I'm about to go now. But Bananas says hi as well. He's very happy to see you. And I'm going to go now before the monkey takes over. Thank you everyone for watching, and goodbye.